Hello, welcome to AI in Action. My name is Maurie, and I'm here with my husband Jim. And it is not Sunday, it is actually Monday because we were on an airplane yesterday and we didn't have a chance to record a podcast because guess what? It's hard to get Wi Fi signal when you're on an airplane.
It's also
But
hard to record whenever you're breaking your husband's fingers because you don't want to be on that airplane.
that is correct. I am a little bit of a nervous flyer, and fortunately, but then again, unfortunately, we're going to be on some airplanes a little more often, traveling around doing some AI training. We have a few more coming up. So thankfully, I think the more I do it, the more I'll get used to it. And hopefully, I can just kind of get over that little bit of fear of flying. It doesn't
And
help.
we live in a
And
world of oversharing.
that's what I was
And
going to say.
we had a pilot, youngster. He would look like he was the same age as our youngest son, but he probably was older. But we thought it was like bring your son to work day because he looked very young. He overshared.
I almost asked the stewardess if it was bring your son to work day because he did look very young. And yes, he overshared. He was like, okay, we're delayed because we've got some engineers on the plane making sure our fuel system's working appropriately. And then 10 minutes later, he's like, okay, well, they think we're good. So I have to wait for the little clear to be printed out. And I'm like, get me off this plane. So anyway, we actually were in San Francisco and it was a great trip. We really enjoyed ourselves. We went into San Francisco and we actually drove over to the coast, a town called Mendocino. Beautiful scenery, great weather, and we got to meet a very, very nice superintendent. And we are actually going to be going back to Mendocino middle of August and doing some training on artificial intelligence. And you know how much we love doing that. So,
And we know how much you love flying, so it's going to be great.
looking forward to it. I'm going to have to go get my prescription refilled. So.
I know. You'll be fine.
Anyway, one of the things that we did while we were in San Francisco is we kept pulling up our phone and going to ChatGPT and taking pictures of things. And I posted several of them on LinkedIn because we immediately found that it was really easy to use AI while traveling. And so we're going to start a little series on our podcast, probably about once a month. We're going to have somebody come on and talk about their AI traveler, basically, your AI travel companion. Some of the things that we used it for were like pieces of equipment in some of the museums that we were like, oh, I wonder what this piece of equipment is. And we would take a picture and then ask. And some of the foliage and just a bunch of information.
Oh, come on. I had a great idea, which you did. You took a picture of a piece of antique equipment, and you have it looked like a loom of some sort, and
yes.
You had no idea how it worked, and neither did I. So you didn't just ask.
Right. I told it, I said, hey, can you give me instructions on how to use this? It even gave me an image with like a diagram with all the step 1, step 2, step 3. And, it gave me all the different steps on how to use this loom. They were making like rag rugs using it. So it was really cool. Because of that, we have actually asked Raychel, who is our daughter, and she's also part of AI Ed Pro, and she also works at Dell Computer. She actually just did a 16-day trip to the Mediterranean, and she used AI while she was traveling. We had mentioned to her that, hey, we used AI to take a picture of a document that was in a frame that the handwriting was atrocious. And we were like, what does this say? And so as soon as we mentioned to her that we had done that, Raychel was like, oh, well, we used AI while we were traveling too. So we've invited Raychel.
She's our first AI traveler.
She's the first AI traveler. So Raychel, take a second to kind of tell our listeners a little bit about what you do. And then if you could give us some examples on how you used artificial intelligence when you were in the Mediterranean, that would be awesome.
Yeah, so it's been a while since I've been on the podcast. I think I've been maybe once before. So definitely a very different topic on this one. I don't really do a ton of travel, but this one was unique. I actually got married in March, as your listeners might not be aware of, but y'all obviously are. And so this was my honeymoon. Usually I don't leave the country for 2 weeks, but kind of worth it. I do have to comment on your flying and you complaining about flying, seeing as how my travel days were like 22 hours, 10 hours sitting in one spot on the plane. You're not quite there, but that's definitely the worst part of traveling. And I could have been using my time on the plane to research all the different places we were going, but I didn't want to pay for the Wi-Fi. So instead, we did all of our research when we got there, which is where AI came in really handy. So for some context, it was actually a 2-week cruise, which means we went to 9 ports total, which was really great because we had kind of the cruise to be our little safe spot, but it means that there was a lot of different cultures and countries and languages that we were dealing with. We went around Italy, Greece, and a small spot in France. And then some smaller countries like Montenegro, Gibraltar. Yeah, it was a lot. And
Well, tell
everyone,
us before you go any further, though. Tell us about how you connected when you were off on the ship versus off the ship.
sure, yeah. So as anyone from the US going to a different country would know, um, and if you don't get a SIM card in the different country, you have to pay for data. So we actually paid for data on my husband's phone. And so we were able to use, ChatGPT, like the app, and just internet in general, when we were off the boat, which is helpful because even just Google Maps, it did get us lost a few times, but generally better than our own mapping skills. And then on the boat, you can actually pay for Wi-Fi, even though it's ridiculously slow. So in that case, it was easier to use AI as opposed to Google, because then it was one thing loading instead of sitting there trying to get multiple websites to load, because I think that would have taken me like all night trying to plan my ports that way. But yeah, AI was really helpful. The biggest thing that I thought was like I didn't expect it to be able to help me with was actually like at one point we're in Italy and they don't generally like sweet when it comes to their alcohol, but I do, because I am very much so from the US and I like too much sugar and everything. And so I was able to take a picture of the Italian menu, and ask it, like, which wine would you recommend if I want a sweeter wine? Because I definitely did not want to ask the waiter that and get judged. And it was like, oh, based on that preference, like, here's the wine and here's where it's from. And I got a little wine education. Um, and the wine turned out pretty good. The sweeter one I've had on the trip, but
So you would say it was accurate in its assessment,
yeah, and it didn't judge me. I mean,
and this
maybe
is
it did. It didn't act like
ChatGPT,
it judged me. Yes, primarily we use ChatGPT because we have the app, so
right?
it's just easier to open the app that way. And then
It,
obviously be able to upload images.
Jim, is there any other apps that you know of, like AI apps that you can put on your phone? Does Claude and all of them have apps for
All
their
of them
phone
have
now?
apps. All
All
the
of them.
Rachel also has the paid for version of ChatGPT, which is obviously an advantage because if she wanted to get the real advantages of Claude or Google Gemini or whatever, she could not only would she have to put the app on it, but she'd also have to have the paid version. I mean, they have free versions, but the paid version of ChatGPT is still better than the free versions of the others. Um, I liked your comment. I had not thought about that. Your comment about the Wi-Fi being so slow that if you were going to let all the sites load on Google versus the fact that it basically summarizes the information you're looking for instead of giving you a bunch of options that you then have to select and load. And then once you get there, you have to make your own assessment and move on to the next one. That's an interesting observation. I hadn't thought about that.
Oh, don't get me started on the ads. Somehow ads on Google websites load way quicker than the content.
I
So
hadn't thought about that either. That's interesting. That's interesting. That's something for people that are intending to travel to think about. Because when we were in Northern California, we had very spotty coverage, and sometimes the coverage was horrible, and everything loaded really slow. And in some cases, I did use ChatGPT. The one thing I did notice, and I'm curious about if you noticed it, I had more difficulty if I tried to use the voice interaction than typing. Did you notice that, or
um,
did you try it?
well, I didn't use the voice interaction a ton
Okay.
because I think my fanny pack already screamed tourist enough without talking to my phone. So
Yeah, especially with the speaker on, so everybody can hear what your phone's saying back.
yeah, we had to pick and choose on that one.
I
And
bet.
we're very aware of like holding our phone and stuff because certain places give you warnings about like pickpocketers. Um,
Mhm.
and so, you kind of have your phone a little closer to you to make sure it's nice and firm in your hands. But I mean, even it was also easier for us to not have to carry around as many euros and stuff because of like with pickpocketers there. Because in
Mhm.
advance, I was able to say like, "Hey, ChatGPT, what's the tipping culture in these different countries?" And so I was kind of able to leave euros on the boat based on what we were planning on doing that day. Or like, "Can I buy this ticket with my card, or do I have to use cash?" And it gave me advice on whether or not taxis would accept card in some places. It gave me advice. Turns out some places do like a 10% tip only in cash, or,
Was
obviously
it
none of the
was it
places are
accurate?
20%, but
Was did you find any inaccuracies, places where it gave you bad information, or did it generally give you good
um,
information?
generally it was pretty good information. I can't think of any time that it was like blatantly wrong. I think the only thing is that, it generally advises you with a lot of these like cathedrals and church buildings to cover your shoulders and knees. And it kind of leans you towards the direction of it being strict. Like, oh, don't even try to go into that church if you are showing your knees. But when you actually got to the location, a lot of them were actually more lenient than what it implied. So I think ChatGPT leans on the side of caution when it comes to like cultural norms, which is for the best, I would say. I'd rather
Well,
be over prepared than under prepared.
yeah, I suppose if you go into one and you're supposed to, and somebody's screaming at you in Italian or French or something, and you don't know what they're saying, it'd probably be better just to take, like you said, a little bit of precaution. Did you use it for? Well, I'm going to let Mari ask questions. I've been asking all the questions. Mari's your
No,
turn.
that's okay. The next question I was asked is, did you use it for any translations at
Exactly what
all?
I was going to ask next.
Or was it
Yeah.
too American in your face? Here, let me pull out my phone to get something to translate.
I would say we mainly did written translations in the sense of, like it translated menus for me. I use it a lot in museums, specifically France doesn't really, well, I can't say France as a whole. Marseille, at their museums doesn't really put English as like a second option on
Oh,
their stuff.
that's a French thing.
Yeah, and what you'll see in Italy, like some don't have any English, but a lot of them do. And so in Marseille, whenever we were at the Palace Museum, we would take a picture of the French plaque telling us like what this information was, because we like museums, and it would tell us and like translate that. Um, I didn't use it for any spoken, like, actual people talking. Instead, I kind of butchered the language myself. More of the European experience of them having to deal with my awful pronunciations. Specifically in France, I wouldn't have even tried because I don't think they would have appreciated it. But
No, they would have judged you severely.
but
So
generally, I mean, for the Italians, I could be like, more like hey, I want to order this off the menu. How should I say it? And like reading it instead of using any kind of speaker stuff. These places
you
are
know,
also really busy, so I don't have the time in most of them to sit there and like listen and try to say, we're getting in and out. Here's your €2, here's your cappuccino, on our way. We drink a
yeah,
lot of
that's actually you
cappuccinos.
mentioned that a couple of times, and I thought that was interesting as well. You mentioned the fact that the speed was a problem. I mean, ChatGPT, because I'm doing a lot with transcription stuff, and
Freeze.
who froze?
Rachel did for just a second, but she's back.
Rachel, did you?
I'm
Who?
still here. I heard you.
Anyway, what was interesting to me was what is the ideal seconds translations per second? If you don't think about it in human conversation when you and I are talking and you're transcribing in your head what I'm saying because you're programmed in English versus this computer that's trying to transcribe it. What is too slow? And apparently you thought that the current rate of ChatGPT's ability to do voice interaction was too slow for how busy the locations were that you were at. Is that
Well,
true? I mean, that's kind of what I'm hearing from you.
yeah, I think that a big part is, well, one, a lot of my translation, when it's poor, like my hand waving kind of gets the point across. And it's
Good
harder to
enough.
hand wave when you have your phone. But additionally, it's more, and it's probably just me being an anxious traveler because I don't do a ton of it. It's more that I'm able to prepare in advance what I'm going to say by reading it, as opposed like I'm not actually listening to what they're saying back. Like that's it's a one-way interaction. So I'm saying, I would like to order this. If they ask me a question past that, that's unfortunate. I think multiple times they were trying to ask me if I wanted sugar. I thought they were asking if I wanted a medium. I'm not really sure what I ended up with. And so it's actual getting it back that I didn't feel comfortable using like the ChatGPT translation for that. I wanted to know it before I got to the front of the line.
So since it was a transactional interaction, you felt like prepping was better than trying to do it in real time.
At least for me. Yeah. Maybe, I mean,
Did you see
Matthew
anybody
and I have,
else? Did anybody have a translator in their hand that you saw?
no, honestly, I think what I primarily saw is people doing research the night before they did ports. Like I would discuss with people, like
Mhm.
we were on the bus leaving the cruise to go to the different places, like what they were going to be doing and what research they'd done, what sites they were going to see. Um, I think most people, I mean, I guess the kinds of people that choose to do a cruise are probably the people a little more like me that are not like, we're just gonna make it all work. Like we prepare the night before. We chose to
So
stay on a boat.
we're being Americans and we're just butchering their language because most
I
Europeans that
know,
I
I
found
know. There was a lot of Australians on this boat.
that were butchering language as well.
It wasn't just Americans. This is a European cruise.
Well, most Europeans that I met speak like 8 languages. Most Americans speak one, maybe 2. So they have a distinct advantage in their ability as a European to communicate versus what we do. I did have one interesting thing that happened, or I thought it was kind of funny. You sent me a picture, or Matthew did, of a Roman ruin, and had a Latin inscription on it. So I asked ChatGPT what it said, and it translated, and it goes, "It looks like you're missing a piece. If you could find that other piece, I could probably translate the rest." And it probably got broken 2,500 years ago. And I'm like, I don't think I can find that piece. Can you just tell me what that says? And so it gave
Yeah,
me a basic translation. I guess it was written in Latin because it was, 2,000-year-old Roman inscription. But it was just funny because it was like, find that missing piece and I'll help you out.
a little
Okay, so
archaeologists in the background are like, yes, I agree. We need the missing piece.
all
Exactly.
right, so I'm gonna jump in because we're 16 minutes into our podcast, and it's one of those things where, Raychel, I want to ask, what do you think that the next time you go somewhere, are you going to is this going to be like a go-to thing for you from now on? Do you think that an AI traveler is going to become like second nature?
I definitely think that even as someone who is obviously in the AI space, I still like I almost wish I had thought more about how it could help me before I went, which makes me
Right.
lends to me using it more in the future because it was really one of those things that we had the app for other purposes, not just for us traveling. And I was like, oh, well, maybe it can help us with this. And then, I'm still surprised when I'm like, oh, wait, it actually could help. Like, why didn't I think of this sooner? So I think that I would definitely want to explore more in the future of like how it could be helpful when traveling because you're so out of your comfort zone. So having something that's like a little buddy on your shoulder, giving you some advice while you're traveling just makes it a little bit less anxiety inducing.
Yeah,
That's
no, I
fair.
agree. And
That's
that's
a
the
good
thing.
answer.
Yeah, when your dad and I were in San Francisco and then we left the San Francisco Bay Area and went over to the coast, we didn't really think about using AI until like the second day we were there. And it was that image that the handwriting was so terrible. And all of a sudden, Jim was like, wow, I wonder if I could just upload this image into ChatGPT and it could tell me what it said and, like what it meant and like some history behind it. And as soon as he did it that first time, we were like, why have we not been doing this the whole time we were there? I mean, even to the point to where like taking a picture of a menu and saying, I need a healthy option. Can you tell me based on this menu what I should eat that, is healthier? Because
Oh, see,
even in
I'll one up that actually. I was able to take a picture of a pasta menu and ask which of the pasta sauces didn't include dairy
like
because I was
that's
like,
Did it work?
I've had so much gelato and lactate pills this trip. Like I maxed out. I actually ran out. I had to buy more in Gibraltar. Just for anyone who is truly lactose intolerant, lactose is universal. Europe has it too. So take your lactate pills. But yeah, no, it was able to say like, oh, this is traditionally tomato-based sauce with meat and stuff like that. So I was able to.
I wouldn't recommend that for like peanut allergies, because yours is not
it can't
lethal. It's
guarantee
uncomfortable.
cross-contamination. Yeah.
Yeah, yours is not. Your allergies are very inconvenient and uncomfortable, but they're not lethal.
That
So,
there's a lot of like little memes and stuff out there about people who are lactose intolerant, and they're like looking at the thing of ice cream and going, yeah, it's worth it.
I don't recommend that when walking 10 miles a day. Don't risk it. But
that's fair. That's fair.
Generally, I wouldn't be surprised if ChatGPT and the other AIs even said like, hey, I'm not a doctor, because it tends to say that when it comes to like more severe things.
It says that all the time. But I'm glad it was useful. It is interesting and ironic that we literally train people for a living. And the first day we were I'm like you. When I travel, it's a little stress. The flying is not stress inducing for me. It's the complexity, which Maurie generally deals with when it comes to, how do we get to our rental car? How do we get there? How do we do this? How do we do this? All that stuff kind of puts me off balance a little bit. So it usually takes me a day.
Can you say Jim is an engineer?
Yeah, the lack of control is definitely a problem. However, I did make an interesting footnote. When you're in the redwoods out in the middle of California and you take a picture of a leaf and you ask ChatGPT, you're not going to get an answer. You know why? Because you have no cell phone service in the middle of the redwoods. So maybe these local models, as they get more sophisticated and the next iPhone has maybe the local models will actually be able to answer questions while you're in the middle of the redwoods. But at the moment,
save the leaf and upload it later.
Future. Absolutely. Save the image, upload it when you get back into a decent cell service, and then say, okay, I picked this leaf. Am I about to have a rash? So
since you were nice enough to point out that I'm an engineer, engineers want instantaneous gratification when it comes to, I want to know what that is now. I don't want to know what that is an hour from now when I finally ride the train back to the train station and get actual access to Wi-Fi or cell signal. I wanted to know then.
And we're not going to say what cell phone company, but we are going to go ahead and switch to a different carrier, because one of the things that we did notice is that our carrier, everyone else had their cell phones out. We're not native to the area, so
AT&T is terrible in Northern California where we were.
And our statements are not indicative of AI Ed Pro opinions. That is Jim Beasley's opinion.
That is Jim's opinion. Because everyone I talked to out there said we use Verizon, and I had one bar the whole time I was there, if I was lucky. So
I know
apparently there's not a lot of towers.
You could finish this podcast talking about that. I'm going to end my traveling note so we can move to the next topic and just say that I do intend on taking my photos that we took, because Matthew took so many photos, and as we're doing our album, I'll probably use an AI to help me remember what some of the things were, so I can properly label my album. That's my next. That's my post being back from travel usage. So
that's awesome.
What a good idea. How it goes.
That's a good. So basically, it's ironic because AI is all about labeled data, and you're going to use AI to label data.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Cool.
But
I'm interested to hear how the output of that. All right.
And I'm also going to mention, hang on real quick. I'm also going to mention that because of this trip that Raychel took, she has mentioned it to a friend of hers that is about to spend 2 weeks in
Greece. Yes.
Greece.
With
and
their boyfriend. So
and they are going to use AI the whole 2 weeks, and they're going to make copious amounts of notes for us. And then they're going to come on the podcast and talk about their AI traveling experience, and hopefully a few weeks from now, whenever they're back, and we'll talk to them about how they used AI on their trip. Okay, so we have about 5 or 6 minutes left, so we're going to run real quick and cover some news. We always try to talk about what's the latest, greatest in AI news, and one of the big things I wanted to mention is that the Department of Education has released 49 pages on developer ed technology, developer like norms and guidances on how to develop using AI. So Jim, I said, hey, here's 49 pages. Tell me what you think about it.
I think the same thing. I always think about stuff like that. It tends to be extraordinarily general. And if you're a developer, which I am, I mean, I did it for a living. Now I'm education and I do developer on the side. But as a developer, when you come to a developer and you say stuff like, I need you to make sure this, and this happens, and then you go away and the developer goes, I have no earthly idea how to do that. The idea being is they're giving you the idea. There's a lot of idea people out there. They're throwing out ideas. There's not near as any actual doing it people as there is ideas people. I had a guy once that approached me about doing a developer job, and he wanted to be the idea man. Like, dude, I don't need another idea. I got plenty of those. What I need is to actually implement one. And when you look at the words that bother me that they use the most and stuff like this, remove bias, keep the human in the loop. I hear these over and over again. You and I asked a teacher not long ago, it was several months ago, but ask a teacher, you keep mentioning bias, define it for me and tell me how to remove it. And
they couldn't do it.
Well, she started giving us examples of where she has had bias met up. But a few examples is not going to be, how do you in general remove bias? Who defines it? I mean, Google is biased if you want to make that argument, because depending on what I type in, it gives me different answers. And based on my educational background, I type in questions differently. Therefore, Google's biased against people with a particular type of education. How do you define it? Raychel, how do you define bias?
Well, I might be biased with my answer, but
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I really think it boils down to if we could define it, then we could fix all these social issues humans have. But we haven't managed to do that on a human side. So how can we possibly expect it to be perfect on a technology side? Because all technology is developers in the background. So all the issues that humans bring to the table, the technology is going to have as well.
Yes, they are. And that's kind of the problem I have with it. I see terms like safety, security, remove bias. If you to keep the human in the loop thing, that is a mechanism. There's actually an acronym for it. That's a mechanism for assessing how something's doing. But you're told as a developer, if you go there and you say, I'm going to release this program, but oh, by the way, I have to release a person with it, because that person, your boss is going to go, what? No, that's the cost of operating are too high. I think that's part of what happened to Los Angeles County with what they were trying to roll out for their schools, because they were very adamant about safety, security, and keeping people in the loop. How do you do that and still make something that can actually make money? Humans are we ran a restaurant. Our biggest cost was human labor. And so you're constantly being told to remove that. That's what technology does all the time. How do you do that with an AI to make it safe, secure, unbiased, yada, yada, yada? I don't know. But the term getting thrown out over and over again.
I think what it really comes down to.
Go ahead, Raychel.
I think it really comes down to something you guys have talked about quite a few times with all the different news things, is that people who use AI are going to be more effective than people who don't, but there's still a people part of it. So using AI as a tool, that's how you keep people into it, is that you don't just say, hey, AI, does this food have peanuts? Am I going to die from eating it? Right? Like, you use it as a recommendation, but maybe when it comes to your really big decisions,
exactly,
you keep the people in that way.
You can't remove it from the AI. The people have to keep their brain engaged.
I'm very impressed that you found some news on AI, even though you've been gone for the last week. It does show that maybe you should relax more on vacation. But,
no,
do that for the next one.
He had his laptop on every single day.
Okay, we're running out of time. Look at the time. We're running out of time.
4:00 in the morning. Still
running out of time.
The time difference. The time difference.
I don't know what it was. I mean, it's like where we were staying. She had Wi-Fi at the little cabin, which was it was a great little location,
Maurie,
right up in the little redwood area.
We're running out of time.
Oh, Jim, okay. you just hush. You're obsessed and you know it.
I know.
But anyway, we are running out of time. Is there anything else, Raychel, that you'd like to mention, Jim, that you'd like to mention? Because we only have a couple of minutes.
I guess I do want to say that if any of the people listening have done any cool things with AI traveling, I'd like to do more traveling in my future. Write in comments wherever you see this posted. Like, tell us if you've used AI for travel. Obviously we don't think of it first, and we should. So give us your recommendations.
Absolutely. I'd love to see some comments about, hey, what do you think about that? What do you think about this? So that would be awesome. All right, guys. Well, this is AI in Action. My name is Maurie, and I'm always here with my husband, Jim. And today we have Raychel with us. But we sit down normally on Sundays and talk about artificial intelligence. So we are gone for today, and we hope that you guys have a marvelous rest of the week.